Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grips, MAF Corporation, and FFL Payments. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew LaRosiere, and I'm joined today by the Rat Man, who is Who are you with today?
I'm currently storming High Charity. Don't mind me. This show also brings you commentary on storming High Charity.
With your Ni-Hao edition storm rifle?
Yeah, in the real life Halo, they're going to use Ni-Hao rifles.
I do like the Type 91. Despite the whole case head ripping off thing, but whatever.
Every time I post the Type 91, people always ask, like, is it good? Should I get one? And I've gotten great because at this point I've got a concise response. And anybody who doesn't have their head like 3 feet up their ass will agree that I'm correct. And my take is that the Type 91 is great because it is a really cheap way to learn that piston uppers for AR-15 suck.
Oh, brutal. I like the Type 91 for what it is, which is like a fascinating exercise in both reverse engineering and also wild shots in the dark. And so, we both have one, and I think we both enjoy shooting them.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, the issue is the whole working thing. They don't do that all the time.
They don't do it nearly as good.
They do it way better than a 416 in my experience. So people are going to love that. And with that, let's get into the news. First up, guys, federal court has again torpedoed the Mexican lawsuit. This is on TFB. One of the most significant lawsuits in firearms world has been mostly dismantled in the U.S. federal district court. Yeah, I love when people who don't. Anyway, they dismissed the Mexican government's lawsuit against the Gunmakers only as to the majority of the claims. So what's still up on this one?
I haven't been following this one well enough because I know there was initial indications from the judge that it wasn't going to amount to anything, and so
because it's absurd. I didn't know we had British judges.
So whenever this guy started laying down the law, I stopped caring much about this case. It's it's certainly egregious that anti-gun groups are reaching to foreign countries to interfere in our gun politics.
Yeah,
it's right. It's fine when they do it. It's different with a capital D. It's fine whenever you conspire to interfere in American elections and politics with Mexico. You just can't do it whenever they have the same colors in our flag. It's because of the color flag, red, white, and blue on their flag. Can't conspire with them. Yeah,
the Mexican government certainly seems determined to get paid by the U.S. firearms industry. Stay tuned, because if they don't give up, it's not hyperbole to say the American firearms industry's future remains at stake. No, it doesn't. So they've changed forum several times. Like, maybe we'll find a federal judge that is so intensely unprincipled that they'll let us bring this lawsuit. So this one was Massachusetts, and even there they're like, come on now.
Come on.
So yeah, initially it got shot down on PLCAA, and then they appealed this. The appeals court did this weird little narrow thing saying that PLCAA only protects firearms manufacturers from lawsuits concerning criminal misuse within the U.S. So they're like, oh, technically, and that's a hyper technical nonsense thing. But the weird thing is that the Mexicans aren't properly. They're alleging that we're sending our guns over there, despite the fact that there's a legal mechanism to do that, and we do that through that mechanism. But of course, they're complaining about the ones that come here from our federal government, and also, coyotes and things. But it's just more back and forth forum shopping nonsense. So this will probably be something that keeps cropping up for a while. It's just really unfortunate that it is going to be very hard to recover, even in the event that they finally get let's say they get a fee award or something, because this is so absurd and it keeps happening. I have a feeling that the Mexican government will be very hard to recover attorney fees from. Just a hunch. Next up, we've got some worse news. Of course, it's not shocking at all, right? But the Fourth Circuit has upheld Maryland's assault weapons ban. The most bizarre ruling we've seen in a while. Well, not the ruling itself, but the way it happened.
Yes.
There was a 3-judge panel that was handling one of these that was actually looking pretty good, and then the Court of Appeals preemptively snatches it away from them, and they're like, the court en banc snatches it away. They're like, no, you don't touch that, and they amass all of the hardware bans into one case. And so, yeah, on Tuesday, they rejected arguments against the Maryland's particularly weird assault weapons ban, and of course the logic was based on the AR-15, which is a named banned item, being indistinguishable from an M16, which is false only as to the direction, right? Because the M16 is a specific breed of the species AR-15, but they just got it backwards, right?
The particularly interestingly dishonest thing here is they'll point to and they did the same thing in Illinois, where the anti-gun groups will point to, semi-automatic weapons can fire like 500 rounds per minute with plenty of asterisks and stars and commas and yeah buts. But then whenever you go and look at whenever they're in a situation where they need to like downplay the rate of fire of these things, they'll be like, it's 120 rounds per minute. That's what a shooter can do with the semi-automatic weapon.
Right.
So it's like constantly in tension with itself. And the most frustrating thing about this is that I've been doing more of my research, right? My late night gun history digging research. I found some articles from the 1960s before the Gun Control Act that was dealing with the question of prohibitory laws in the states and at the federal level, because in 64 there wasn't a lot of these things. It was relatively uncommon, but there seemed to be a strong understanding amongst pro-gun groups. The particular letter I'm talking about was from 1964, and NSSF actually signed on to this open letter and said that the Second Amendment unequivocally is for killing tyrants, right? That's what it was, right. That's like why they wrote it, and that's what it's for. It's not about hunting or shooting deers or anything like that. It's for shooting people. They get that just like dead on. And then in the same letter, they're like, we'd be fine. We're in support of getting rid of all prohibitions on possession of rifles, shotguns, handguns, and not machine guns, though. You can't have machine guns. And I think the inklings of the problem got planted there, where they started planting this idea that there's some division, there's some difference with machine guns. They didn't really speak to what it was then. But as the gun industry leans more into, their words, assault pistols, and their words, assault rifles, and their words, assault weapons, which were all semi-automatic things. Right. As the gun industry leaned into these terms, the anti-gunners were essentially handed this on a silver platter, where all they had to do was point to these things. And as Josh Sugarman came right out and wrote, like, here's the policy for banning these things. Say that, wow, they're just like machine guns, and Fudds will trip over themselves to want to ban them. And sure enough, right, the 94 assault weapons ban does not happen. If in 1964 and before then, honestly, and since then, there wasn't an overt concession from the pro-gun side that says, but not machine guns. Not right. People don't need to have those. The Second Amendment is for killing tyrants, and is for having civilians armed with military-grade equipment so they can either take on a tyrannical military, defend the United States from foreign tyranny in the capacity of the military itself, but they don't need machine guns. Come on, you don't need machine. And in so it's weird because you're kind of like you're merging two streams, right? So like in the time leading like post 86 and pre 94, the voice that said, all of the voices said it's for resisting tyranny, right? But the voices that said specifically we need the same military style hardware were like distinct minority voices up to 94. There was this bizarre confluence where the Fudds were like, we need to have guns in case there's tyranny, and the type of guns we should have are those for hunting, right? Like, and there was all like, it coincides with the whole everything's a sporter, right? That wasn't
on accident. That everyone had to be convinced that guns were sporting. And look at all of the laws that happened around that era. Everything relates to some sporting purpose. But you would hear politicians saying the right is here to protect us from tyranny. So that's why we need to be able to have sporting weapons. And the people who would say like, no, we need the same hardware as everyone else would like be like, ugh. It wasn't until like 2005, right? After the assault weapons ban sunset that people were like, no, I want this actually. Right.
And certainly with public sentiment, that's true. Though this letter from 1964, which was co-signed by NSSF and the National Police Officers Association of America, which is bizarre to think of, specifically identifies, hey, back then they had military guns and they were using them in military capacities. And that's an important thing for us. If it's not just a touchstone, it's something that we should still have. And I thought it was hilarious where like they then wrap up the letter by saying, yeah, but no machine guns.
Yeah.
In the 1930s, 1920s, really, maybe that's a rational thing because military adoption and use of machine guns was like, not that severe. But by 1960, the impetus since the end of World War II was everybody's got to have a machine gun. Everyone and their mother. The M1 carbines, they're machine guns now. The M1 Garens, they're machine guns now. Thompsons are still machine guns. Grease guns, BARs, 1919s. Like you now find a situation where 9 out of every 10 guns is federally defined at this point as a machine gun when it comes to military use. Yeah,
64 is a weird time, right? Because that's pre-GCA. And 64 was at the tail end of everyone still agreeing that handguns should be banned.
Right.
So I think just the public discourse around guns was just entirely fucked up until very recently. Like you just get a lot of foot eating, right? So yeah, and it could be, in part that the people at NSSF and things that like would have had combat experience likely wouldn't have been issued a machine gun.
And so they think machine gun equals belt fed stuff.
Yeah, they think machine gun is like, that's like the MG42. And that was, we didn't like that one.
And frankly, if there were to be, sensible definitions, sensible categorization of arms on a basis of dangerousness, something like a Thompson is a completely different category from something like an MG42. And I me's not dissimilar to like, a semi-automatic 22 under some assault weapons bans. Even a semi-auto 22 is treated the same way as a semi-auto 50 cal. And there's worlds of difference between them. And I guess that really harkens back to something we've talked about at length before, where, nuance, when it comes to the sort of technical definitions of these things, nuance is immensely important. And this nuance is being written by people who have never seen one of these things, never touched one of these things, have only ever learned about these things from the movies. And will frequently, in these giant lists of guns they want to ban, will list guns that only exist in video games or list them by their video game name. Like this is how serious these people are. Is they're like drug-addled staffers are like, what was that gun in that video game? Yeah, we need to ban that one too.
Yeah, it's really a weird situation. And the question is there a difference on principle? Because people will often say, well, no, not that, because that's a military weapon. And it's like, okay, well, what makes it a military weapon? Well, because that's a machine gun, or that's selective fire. And that's like, we get into those debates with people on the Twitter Bird app all the time. But then no one knows how to go the next step, which is, what's the difference between that and the semi-automatic one? And then they want to go technical, right? They want to go, oh, well, more than one round with a single, whatever. It's like, no. I'm not asking for a technical distinction. I'm asking for a principle distinction. What is the principle distinction between the two? And then the furthest you'll get from somebody is, well, the machine gun is designed to mow down a ton of people. Is it? and like,
maybe some of them, but most of them, no.
Yeah, it's like, but is it firing automatically? Does that mean it's for that? No, like that's the answer. A belt-fed weapon, if it's, depending on the caliber, may be better suited to mowing down large amounts of people. I'm just saying, I can imagine a belt-fed weapon designed for mowing down lots of people that was semi-automatic, right? Like imagine like, something very large bore, right? That fired
a Hotchkiss cannon.
Yeah, exactly. Like right, with exploding bullets. Automatic fire itself doesn't mean anything, and that's something that people are refusing to engage with. And it's very hard to, because we've built this massive, since the passage of the NFA, where everyone just accepted, well, duh. I mean, well, since years after the passage of the NFA, because at that time it was very much understood that you couldn't just ban this sort of thing, right? And then eventually it became accepted that, oh, well, I guess they can, because they did, even though they didn't. So the question is there a principal distinction? And no one wants to talk about that. You know why? Because it's very hard to draw those lines. Because when it comes to categorizing firearms, everything aside from, what I always talk about in the nuisance context, right? Like thermonuclear warheads and like heavy explosive things, really all the distinctions are without difference. It's like speed limits. Like a 55 mile an hour speed limit is not principled. It just is. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But people want to believe that there's this principled line that's been drawn, and so we can't go further because we drew the line, despite the fact that we never actually drew it. Right?
Where if you're driving 56, or if the speed limit sign just got changed by some hooligans, like they painted it funny, they used some white paint to turn the 85 into a 55, like where you sit there and pretend this fiction is real, right? Where it's like, oh, there's a big difference, but this fiction is just that, where and I think the easiest way to illustrate this, and it's hard to illustrate to some people because having shot more machine guns will help you understand this better. Right. But if you put a Thompson, like an honest to goodness M1A1 Thompson, in someone's hand, and then you give them a modern, Gucci'd out to the nines, fully equipped, night vision ready, setup compatible, semi-automatic AR-15, and you have them run a couple courses of fire, unless they're like a delusional person, right? Or unless they're like weirdly constructed so that the Thompson somehow works well for them, they'll come away from it going, wow, the semi-auto gun is much more effective for, in the course of fire, they'll go through some sort of simulated combat shooting environment.
Right, with like divergent distances and things. But you don't have to have it all kitted out. I feel like if you give anyone a Thompson, like full-on Thompson, versus like a non-lemon PSA AR with a red dot, like they're gonna be like, no, this one's better. Right?
And I think that it's addressing these sorts of things, I think, are important to make people see that the technical distinction doesn't really follow, the technical distinction being used as a justification for why one is banned and one isn't based in any sort of principle, and it absolutely isn't based in any sort of reality where we understand reality is governed by ban the more dangerous thing but not the less dangerous thing, right? Because there's no consistency there whatsoever.
No, it's just pure nonsense. It's just like SBRs. Like, why is it 16 inches? Why is 15.99 go to jail?
So dangerous, right?
Yeah, no. And the reason it's 16 inches, by the way, is because the government accidentally sold us a bunch of carbines when the law was 18 inches, and they went, whoops, and fixed it. They didn't buy back the guns. They changed the law so they didn't have to buy back the guns.
I think
or admit to any problem.
I think it's doubly interesting that you'll see, right, there's this trend I've noticed of people who will point to the true statistic of the fact that handguns are used multiple times more often than long guns in violent crime. And so you'll point to the fact that, like, okay, most of the machine guns that people are interested in, I guess prior to the advent of Glock switches anyway, but most of the machine guns that people are interested in, typically are long guns. But they would have you believe that anybody who wants to have that sort of thing is an instant ne'er-do-well, right? They are a bad guy because they're a lawbreaker or what have you.
Yes.
Well, they'll still thump this fact that, like, but handguns are used in most crimes. But if you want the long gun that shoots fast, that's only good for crimes, and it's only good for doing a big bad. And this whole, getting us back to the story at hand, this whole cockamamie nonsense. I'm not saying that it didn't get us to a good position. I think the position gun rights is in as a whole is much better than it could have been had certain things gone different ways.
Yeah, could be raining.
That's true, but we've more than metaphorically even shot ourselves in the foot from a standpoint of just like drawing up an imaginary concession that frankly the harder and further I look, there was never a time that this was necessary, right? Like it's not like saying like, oh, here's the line in the sand, we're willing to give up this, staved off any sort of gun control attempt ever, right? And I'm sure in 1964 they didn't know Kennedy was about to get shot, but that certainly didn't help things, because any gun control they were going to ask for was going to happen after Kennedy got shot, and sure enough, there it was. It was the Gun Control Act in its entirety, plus a bunch of import stuff as well. The concessions regarding machine guns should stop, because the NFA itself will only become weaker the more normalized and the more sensical and the more principled we are about the things that are subject to the NFA or assault weapons bans at large, right? Mm-hmm. Where if we don't draw these imaginary distinctions between M16s and AR-15s, you don't have that like idiotic dicta from Heller that like read in context isn't saying that M16s can be banned, but if you're like an 80 IQ blue state judge, you'll read that and go, oh, it's hypotheticalizing. It's not a real word. Hypothesizing. What if we applied this notion of banning military stuff to M16s? Heller says it's not answering that, but they see that question being asked as, haha, M16s can be banned because, like, they've got, bird brain.
You got the thing that Heller that says if this regulation can be upheld, it will be in future litigation by reference to historically analogous statutes.
Right. And they see that and go, so you're saying it can be banned, right? And we have a Supreme Court that I guess is waiting for a most ripe opportunity to address it. And that, herein, I think, is the silver lining in this decision here. From a standpoint of cases the court is most familiar with, remember, this Bianchi assault weapons, Maryland assault weapons ban case was GVR'd at the time of Bruin, right? They've seen this one before. And then they've seen it 3 or 4 times since on various stages of appeal when the lower court got it wrong again, and then the district court got it wrong again, and then they were taking too long to review it, and then it got yanked on bonk. And again, asked to look at this every step of the way, and they've said, no, it's not ready yet. No, it's not ready yet. But certainly have seen it enough times. They know what it's about. They know what that smell is whenever it walks into the room. And so this opinion is bad in all the right ways from a standpoint of it points to the idiotic dicta in Heller. And a lot of this opinion depends on that idiotic dicta, the incorrect reading of that idiotic dicta, the most incorrect reading of it being true. So the Supreme Court sort of got a layup to correct that mistake that should have either been worded better or not included in the first place in Heller.
I can't wait for them to not do it.
I'm not going to put a lot of stock in them doing it, but they've also got the sort of more important question, which is this imaginary distinction that lower courts have decided they can square with Bruin, that there's some fundamental distinction between civilian and military arms. And that's rooted in some historical regulation. And the earliest regulations that they'll point to is like the early 1900s, right? Which is pretty freaking late in the standpoint of history here.
Well, anyway, so all that to say, Fourth Circuit, bad dog. Speaking of that, at the same time, in a separate opinion, they reversed the defaced serial numbers thing because, of course, they fucking did. And they were like, oh, no, it's common use for clawful purposes, and it's not clawful purposes if you deface the serial number, which is like the most intensely contrived dog shit.
This will be another interesting case to watch. The federal public defender who's been arguing this case, by the way, he's been a federal public defender and has argued gun cases before and been somewhat successful in it. The guy on every oral argument that he's been in on this case I've listened into, he is given the most loaded, dishonest questions from every judge that asks them of him, and he answers them with grace, poise, and patience every time. I'm not going to pretend that I have a lot of patience for dishonest questions, but this dude will just answer the most bogus questions ever. Like it's just a good time. I enjoy this. This is so much fun. I do want to give him high praise for the fact that he's got it this far. I'm sure they'll end up appealing it because in this case, there's many invested parties in seeing how this goes. I'm not going to have much faith in the Supreme Court taking this case. However, God, it would be interesting if they did, because
Yeah.
I want those judges to have to put their names, not that they're accountable for anything ever, but I would be very interested in seeing how they shake out on the question of defaced serial numbers, which is
The stupidest thing about this is that we have to remember this is simple possession.
Right.
This isn't about defacing itself. It's simple possession of a firearm with a defaced serial number,
right.
Which I think there's a principal distinction, right? And the way they read Bruin, like by Heller read Bruin, common lawful use for lawful purposes, or common use for lawful purposes.
Lawfully used, commonly lawfully, for purposes lawfully, common law. How many lawfullies are they just going to stick in there?
Yeah, it's idiotic. I think this is a opinion unburdened by principle, I think. Like they take one little bit of dicta, right, which has no legal significance whatsoever, because we all know the real test is historical justifications. Or the realist test we have is there historically analogous laws, right? If not, get out. And they're like, but we found this nugget, and we are going to eat the whole thing until we can uphold whatever we want.
We found this nugget, which was sort of a summarization of finding these historical traditions, and we're now going to backfeed that as though it were a historical tradition, right?
Yeah.
We're now going to feed this black box its own output and see what it spits out. And every time the black box, what the black box actually does is it just adds an extra lawfully every time.
So this is literally the AI anime girl problem, right? Because at first they came out and they're great because they were only eating the hard work of actual unpaid artists, and then it started eating its own outputs, and suddenly they all have like not 12 fingers.
But I mean, from a standpoint of, in case anybody's not familiar, this case had dealt with, like we'd said, simple possession of a defaced serial number. There's not good facts going on in this case. The guy had shot someone at some point. I don't think it was with a defaced serial number gun, but he had one afterwards.
Yeah.
But all that was actually before the courts in this question is that simple possession of a gun with a defaced serial number. But
and that was a facial question too, which is turbo hard mode when it comes to fundamental rights litigation.
Right. And the public defender has done just a fantastic job of arguing it, like I said, but I think the hesitancy that the courts are going to have is that there's there's the simple question, right? The question that's right in front of them, which is the actual simple possession question, which I think most people would be hard pressed to actually think that there's some principal distinction here. But the problem is, if you're the courts, once you start poking holes in the whole serial number and commercial regulation and manufacture of guns questions, it stands to essentially topple most of what the ATF has going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the courts are probably not going to be very amenable to that. So
which is a great reason to abandon constitutional principles, job security.
We need the ATF to stick around to be able to harangue FFLs, because it's very important, so that the way the ATF can stick around so they can harangue FFLs, because it's very important so the ATF can stick around so they can harangue FFLs.
You know what else is funny? The fact that you guys still haven't bought from vzgrips.com. Guys, there's a lot of great stuff there. Rail covers. You need luxurious high-end rail covers for your better than a Thompson AR-15. You also need, I don't know, whatever. Still no Draco grips. Still no. They got chisel shotgun shot stocks.
They're gonna add Skizzle shotgun stocks before they add Draco grips, huh?
Yeah.
It's all the audience's fault, honestly.
Yeah, because they haven't been going on there using the promotional code ThisWeek15, THISWEEK15, and then putting in the notes that we need Draco equipment. But anyway, you know what they say. It's no use broken clock, twice a spilled milk. vzgrips.com. Next up is an interesting bit. This happened really quietly and really suddenly. Well, I guess not suddenly. I guess it could have been very, very like painfully, breathtakingly slow. But Polymer80 is done and dusted. They quietly shut up shop, leaving pretty much everyone in the dark. Their website just went down and they just stopped posting to social media. And like the the realest way we can see is that their building is for sale. So, in case you guys are like, well, it's not right or whatever, their logos are all over the pictures on LoopNet. See, you got their little logos.
Ouch.
And,
and they've got a kitty cat.
Meow meow. 4 roll-ups. And the other funny thing is, like, when you look at this, because you can see that these pictures were taken like before anything was moved out. I ain't see no molding machines, boss.
Where'd they put all the injection molding machines?
Where they get them, Johns?
Where's their investment casting set up for the rails? Hing hao China.
Ni hao. Anyway, so yeah, it's sad. It's sad because, yeah, go on.
It's certainly deeply unfortunate because at the end of the day, I understand there's probably some business mismanagement and these sorts of things going on, but they got hit by like a quadruple, sextuple whammy of
the mega pincher.
It really came down to the ghost gun rule was ultimately meant to stop P80 more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't okay. 80% AR lowers are quote unquote a problem to the ATF, but the 3 billion quadrillion % increase in ghost guns that they were claiming, well, A, is because they weren't keeping track of them 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but the majority of those guns they were recovering once they started paying attention were Polymer80's, and that sort of made Polymer80 their enemy.
Right.
And the ghost gun rule was meant to hamstring Polymer80 more than anybody else. It didn't end up doing that.
Yeah,
quite so. However, then Polymer80 was also based in a state that banned these.
Yeah, which like, and then they didn't move,
which complicated it some because they like had a state court injunction for a while, but needless to say, tedious legal situation on at least 2 fronts.
Right.
But add to this the fact that by my count, as of right now, there's 4 or 5 ongoing lawsuits where Polymer80 is a defendant and they're being brought under these nonsense, like nuisance. A couple of them are the marketing ones, but a couple of them are just like, you selling your product here as a nuisance and violates our state law. And for lack of a nicer way to put it, it seems like Polymer80 wasn't structured well enough to deal with these sort of legal harassments to begin with, because almost immediately they're settling some of these and they're paying like non-trivial amounts of money in these settlements. Like that's as much money as this company makes in a year. They're paying in a settlement that they're losing. Right. That's not fantastic. It's really the only thing. It's the sort of thing that you do if you knew that like you're fucked if you try and fight it. And I feel like you only,
and I remember early on we watched some of the settlements and we were like, why did they do that?
And I think didn't make sense. I think the reason you end up doing that is you were absolutely not prepared to do this. And somewhere you've got a text or an email chain where you're like, oh boy, I hope they don't sue us because we know we're breaking their state law.
Yeah.
if there's something like that gets introduced into evidence, you settle as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
But it sort of put the company in a really tough spot financially where they're paying out settlements that are way too big for them to be paying out. They're having to pay lawyers in all of these cases, right? Like, you getting to that finish line of settlement is one thing. The lawyers themselves are like that much money again. Plus, the company had a hard time during COVID because their injection molding machines were somewhere else, and their rail making machines were somewhere else. Yeah. And so having to get all of this stuff somewhere else
to here
became difficult whenever like the boats and the ports and all that. So they had.
Oh wait, no, it's made USA. They don't have support for USA
to cross the river.
Oh yeah,
the Atlantic River.
Yeah.
Pacific River, really, but
Pacific River.
They were pinched from many different directions because of this. Just like a perfect storm of bad happenings, and perhaps like at least some sprinklings of, I'm not going to say inept leadership, but inopportune or imperfect leadership. To not prepare better for, okay, you know how many of your guns are showing up in crime scenes. You should probably have better legal preparation in this regard. Like, at this point, it may become it's cheaper for you to just be on the offense and sue every state that you think is going to come after you. So, you're at least costing them as much as they're going to cost you. But at the end of the day, Polymer80's owner took to Facebook to say that it may not be a permanent shutdown, but it is a complete shutdown as for now, in that people who have existing orders might get them filled. Who knows?
Yeah, it's been interesting because like you'd see them do hyper aggressive sales, for a while, for like years now, and it always made me wonder why. Because when you look at their products, like their margins had to have just been outrageous. So it is a case study in having a great product in a great market, and then there's some other group of factors that can still bring you down. What they actually were, I'm sure we'll learn more in time, especially if we can kind of stick our nose to it. But whether it be from, I would be interested to see how much the legal angle did snatch away from their ability to stay above water. Because they certainly aren't shutting down because they were making too much money. Something happened that just made the books not look great.
I know another part of that was. Do we know whether where they were getting injection molded? I'm not entirely sure on the injection molded, but I know the rice came from the land of the rice and rice.
Yeah. No, that was obvious. But I just wonder. I wonder whether they were having that done stateside, because there are a lot of molding houses. I'm just openly wondering about it in case people are like, no. We worked on that, and we're in Minnesota or something. Some country with the same
Shenzhou, Minnesota.
No, some country with the same standard of living as the normal place, but some country state, right? Same thing. But anyway,
I know another thing that must have hurt them pretty badly is by the text of the initial rule, Polymer80's were probably okay, and then ATF sent out a letter saying they're probably okay, and then they had another letter that said that no, actually, the rear pocket in the frame needs to be filled now too, and Polymer80 went and invested in a non-trivially more complex injection mold for their frames. They probably could have modified existing molds, but only maybe could have done that, and then tooled up to do this, and then the rule got enjoined such that they didn't have to do that.
Right.
And if they did modify their existing molds for that, that's not good.
Right.
Because molds are expensive.
Yeah.
So they certainly had a lot of tail wagging dog going on, where they were getting whipped around by their own inertia.
Yeah, it depends. Getting a mold made in the US for something like that could, is easy 6 figures. Getting it made in the mold making place is like 25-50 grand. So there's a lot of it's just interest. This is a really interesting situation to me. I mean, of course, just because I'm, obviously in the industry, and it just makes you wonder how somebody with just such a juicy, creamy little nugget of a product. The big wonder I have is what percentage of it is mismanagement. Because it's some percentage.
You have to attribute at least some, and at the very least, it's whichever amount went to God knows what that should have gone to. Let's find some like real asshole lawyers that. Well, of course, they spent a lot of money on asshole lawyers to go and shake people down about patents, which was the most idiotic way they could have possibly spent that money.
Yeah, that was good. That was very good. They just refused to pivot whenever nonsense was happening. And I remember at one point we had reached out to them and we're like, hey, we'll standardize on your rail. Sell us your rails, right? And locking blocks. And they told us to go fuck ourselves. So it was like, okay. Not saying that had a significant impact at all.
Right.
I'm just saying that's like a broader point, right? This is a company that was very rigid in what it wanted to do, and you can look at that going all the way back for like it generally had its product from start to finish.
Yeah, because like in 2021, you couldn't buy the rail separate from frames no matter what. And there was like a couple of loopholes people became aware of, and like even those sort of dried up. But you know, they're before our now pause/end of their story. They were selling them shit separate.
Yep. After the ship had already sailed, though.
Right.
And the printed frames had nothing, were not compatible, which whatever. All right. But yeah, no, it's sad to see, is especially just because, this is people and people's livelihoods and stuff like that. Not just the management, but there's people who went to work every day. It's just a real shame. Next up, this California's gun rationing law. It's like a high school relationship, blocked, unblocked, and blocked again. So, of course, earlier the year it was struck down, and then the injunction was stayed while it went on appeal, and then now the 3-judge panel in Wynn v. Bonta put it back.
Yeah, and so usually stays don't get undid like that until there's an opinion in place. So this is I don't want to say it's a guarantee because nothing is in the Ninth Circuit, but this is a relatively gun-friendly panel. And the fact that the stay went away makes me think that their opinion will be something along the lines of, what in the ever-living fuck, California? This is the most idiotic law you could have possibly thought of. Please stop.
Well, yeah, because in oral arguments, they were saying some pretty advanced brain stuff. Like, what about gun collectors who buy like several guns from the auction? They'll then have to, burden a dealer to hold them. And they're like, well, yeah, they can just get one a month.
This solves it somehow. Yep. As well as, usually they'll be able to at least point to like, oh, here's a public safety goal this insane gun law supports. What's the public safety goal here? Like, oh, we'll stop gun trafficking. Do a lot of gun traffickers buy their guns in California to get them out? Because I was led to believe that's not the way that works. And in fact, California has screaming fits. Gavin Newsom has gone to Twitter to scream and cry about the fact that it's the other way. People buy guns outside of California and bring them in, and their law would have nothing to do with stopping that. So it's certainly one of like the least justifiable public safety causes involved in a gun law. And certainly any like half-wit application of Bruin would also lead you to this conclusion. And so it's going to be really funny whenever the Ninth Circuit take this one on bonk and says, actually, this is the smartest gun law, the most consistent. Every gun law at the founding said that you could only buy one gun in 30 days. It's all of them. The British colonies back to the 1400s. In the Civil War, one gun, and most people owned one gun, and that's because and one gun in 5 years, actually, because that's how much money they had, but in 30 days. And it's really good. I could have a job on the Ninth Circuit.
Why not? All right, guys. Next up, be sure to go to fflpaymentprocessing.com for any of your payment processing needs. If you are in the gun industry, you need to check out fflpaymentprocessing.com. You will get great rates. Just give them a call. Check it out. Next up, this is an interesting one. A qualified immunity win. This was in the Second Circuit, which is hell. So this was a case where a guy who presented a valid carry permit and was then given the courtesy of a 30-minute detention in a squad car while the cop did what I don't know, rummaged around and was a cop in general. Yeah. On appeal, Andruski argues that we should reverse the district court's denial of qualified immunity because the presence of the lawfully owned firearm in the vehicle gave him the requisite probable cause to detain Sukina, search the interior of his car and his trunk. So, like, literally, the cops were saying, oh, no, we need qualified immunity for our unconstitutional arrest because he presented a lawfully possessed firearm, and thus we then arrested him and searched him. So, yeah, the Second Circuit was like, no, I'm not going to overturn the denial of QI. Thanks. You can go on ahead now. Which is a good thing. And in another interesting move, the NYPD has issued an emergency rule where they are relaxing handgun permit carry stuff. Likely they're doing this to pivot and avoiding or like getting ahead of a lawsuit that's happening. So yeah, this NYPD issued an emergency rule in regards to the issuance of concealed carry permits. Has made several updates to the way they operate. Key takeaways: non-residents may apply to the NYPD even if they have no ties to the city, such as employment for a concealed carry permit. So that was one change. If the permit is issued, the licensee will abide by the rules and laws within the city of New York with respect to carrying a concealed handgun. You may not have been convicted of assault in the third degree, menacing, or misdemeanor DWI within 5 years. And non-residents must complete the 18 hours of training to be issued the permit. You can book our 18-hour training class here. But, yeah, this is in an attempt to moot the Foundation for a Safer New York's lawsuit, as well as several others. They've adjusted the number of handguns one may own on a specific license as well. So this is literally New York, as it does. New York's favorite thing is to try to squirm out of rights violation by going, "No, I wasn't doing that."
And unfortunately, they've succeeded in getting away with it at least
more times than they have
before.
Yeah,
which is particularly awful. And I would encourage anybody to think of the analogy of voting rights, where imagine the state of Georgia just made it so anybody passed a law or a decree, really, saying that anybody who makes under $50,000 in a year can't vote in the upcoming election. And by the time it makes its way through the courts to actually get that nonsense thrown out completely, the damage will have been done. But then if Georgia gets rid of the lawsuit on their, gets rid of the law on their own, and they're like, sorry, it's moot, there is no standing anymore. It's so intensely dishonest that any court would allow a state to get away with something like that, where it's like, we both know what you did and what you're doing now. Saying oh, I'm no longer touching you before you go and touch them again by passing a law that does basically the same thing. It's kind of awful. Right. And it's why I am a strong proponent for qualified immunity, not protecting politicians either. You should be able to personally bankrupt them with lawsuits over things like this. That's true. You know what else is true? MAFCorp is the store for you. Guys, go to maf-arms.com, use promotional code FUDBusters, get you a big, fat, juicy discount. There's all kinds of wonderful items available for sale on this web zone. So, guys, check it out. It's very important that you do that. That's maf-arms.com. Use promotional code FUDBusters or any of the other codes that are out there on the Twitternet, and that will, advance the war, the code war. And let's see who's winning the code war right now. For the month of August, the top contenders are PSR, Fudbusters, and Control Pew. And next up after that is RK. So it's quite a war that's going on. So guys, if you want Fudbusters to pull ahead, go ahead, place an order, use the promotional code Fudbusters. So now we've got two NSSF stories. We touched on NSSF a little earlier. Let's touch on them again. Let's touch them a little harder this time. Don't stop touching them.
Yeah. They've donated $100,000 to Massachusetts' goal for challenging the new gun control law in Massachusetts. So that's nice. NSSF, the Firearms Industry Trade Association, donated $100,000 to Massachusetts Gun Owners Action League to support a legal challenge to the new onerous gun control law that was passed by the state legislature and signed by Governor Healy. It basically, this is going to go towards a challenge, which sometimes I wonder where some of that money goes. But anyway, yeah, the specific law, also known now as Chapter 55. Oh yeah, this was that super bulwarky law that rewrote the entirety of Massachusetts gun law. So, and it was also Bruin responsive and basically doing everything that it wasn't supposed to. So that might be quite a complicated fight indeed. So that's good on the NSSF. In other NSSF-related news, the National Association for Gun Rights accuses NSSF of screwing up their Colorado lawsuit. NSSF refuses to defend study killing Colorado magazine ban lawsuit. Yeah, so this is a press release from National Association for Gun Rights that's basically saying that because NSSF refused to like be their expert witness or refused to provide an expert witness in backing up an old NSSF study, despite the fact that their earlier expert was disqualified for, admittedly probably nonsense grounds, that this is all their fault. We were clear with the NSSF, if you won't defend your study in court, it kills our case. NFGR President Dudley Brown said, all we wanted was for NSSF to testify to the facts they already published. This is interesting. That's what I'll say. National Association of Gun Rights is the nation's second largest pro-gun organization with 4.5 million members and supporters nationwide. I think that all of these numbers are bullshit.
I think all of them are the second biggest.
Yeah, they're all the second biggest. I'm not taking shots at. You guys know I'll be happy to take shots at any of these groups. They're all grifts, except for the ones that are primarily volunteer. But this, I don't know. This kind of just goes to show that everything is nonsense. I don't even know what to say about this. Like, that sucks.
If
really
I had to guess, right, this is some hyper conjecture tea leaf reading going on here. If I had to guess, NSSF knows that if they have to talk in detail on the record under oath or what have you about the specifics of their magazine ban study, where they said there's like some number of 100 bajillion super large standard capacity magazines out there. If they have to talk about it under oath, it's going to open them to a line of questioning that will poke a lot of holes in this study. They realize that currently this study has just been accepted as more or less uncontested fact in a lot of other magazine bans. It would fuck up a lot of other magazine bans if they go into Colorado now and have to open their mouth and have an anti-gun lawyer ask them a question to the effect of like, but
like, what underlies this supposition? Like, how was this?
You didn't actually count these magazines, right? Like, how many manufacturers did you actually talk to about the number of magazines they actually made? And the answer is going to be like, I don't know. We asked like 5 of them, and then like interpolated from there. And the anti-gunners will be able to point to like simple statistics, will show you like that gives you somewhere between like you there could be 100 times less magazines than you're saying based off of the data that you actually have,
right?
And rather than embattle these other cases with having to address like, oh fuck, the testimony that because where they didn't need testimony from the NSSF because it was just sort of accepted as like even the anti-gunners are willing to say like, okay, maybe it's not that many, but it's about that many magazines that they're not going to endanger that by having to like quibble over it here.
I mean, sure, that's a possibility. That's like a a more Wendigoon type interesting possibility. It's also likely that they're just like, there's a lot of personalities in this sphere, and it's a very small sphere, and they just don't get along. But yeah, I think the main takeaway here is like, it sucks. It would really suck to be in that position, but I don't know. I guess I don't know if it's foul to call them out like that. I guess if it's true, they did the right thing by calling them out.
If it's true, they should also just spill the tea. Be like,
yeah, if it's true, they should. But they the way they wrote this up is just intensely suspicious.
Right. Like if it's true, they should share the emails that they had with NSSF, where NSSF is like, nah, dog, we ain't backing that up. What the fuck?
Yeah.
As well as whatever justification may or may not have taken place to sort of like stay above board, because when trying to hold someone accountable and it's clear that you're also hiding something, it becomes this game of not he said, she said, but almost like a game of telephone where it's like, I can tell, but neither of you are happy with the way things went. And this just sort of becomes devolves into a battle that they pitch against each other where neither of them really stands to gain anything.
Yeah. and those entertain me to no end.
They are certainly entertaining. They're also not productive.
Yep, it's a great use of donor dollars. Speaking of better uses of dollars, we have patriotpatch.co. Guys, patriotpatch.co is the longest time supporter of the show. So you got to go there and get your custom designed patches, apparel, and accessories for any freedom-loving individual. Latest patch of the month is the boating accident patch. So that means the next month's one will be great. So guys, you need to sign up for the Patch of the Month Club and get the next one before we know what it is. Just kidding. I'm in the Patch of the Month Club, so I'll know at the same time, I think, unless you're closer to the warehouse. But guys, patriotpatch.co, check their stuff out. They got a lot of good stuff, and they're the longest time supporter of the show, and the owner of it used to run the show. So they're great people. Be sure to give them your support. And when you do, use promotional code TWIG10. Twig 10. And thank you guys for joining us. It is 3 a.m, so if we were a little sleepy on this one, that's why. But yeah, we had some interesting stuff happen. But yeah, we have another Fudd Blasters review dropping. This one is of a grail gun that is a grail gun to many people. So be sure to subscribe also to Fudd Blasters to check that out. Be sure to go on the Patreon to get access to the Discord. And on top of that, you need to give Ivan Patreon money as well. He has his own Patreon. What is your Patreon?
Pretty sure it's Ivan Prince Guns. Last time I hadn't checked, and this time I also hadn't checked very good either.
That's important. So you guys can see that he's really wanting to get your support on there. I am really wanting to get your support. And so I have a script that was written for me by one of our members. And it's, someone brought up this idea on our Discord. And by the way, pay money to join the Discord. That what if we had a multi-stage trigger that fired around at each stage? Legally not burst fire, but it seems like this would work within the single function test. These are the kinds of conversations our autists get into following developments in firearms litigation. And yeah, that's actually a product that existed before. This is what I didn't tell them. There was a, what do they call it? The tri-burst.
Yeah.
And I don't think that ever got deemed a machine gun.
I don't know. Probably depends on who you ask.
Yeah, but I've studied a lot of the deemings, and I never saw the tri-burst have a problem. But the tri-burst was like a horrible, hideous, like external cam mess where basically, there was 3 lumps, and as you pulled through, it would lump 3 times. And from the old forums I crawled, it seemed generally that it didn't work. But I do feel like that's an interesting thing to be explored, and I think that there might be a way to do it that's not idiotic. It would certainly be substantially more mechanically complicated than the tri-burst was, but like I said, those are the types of conversations we have. So if you feel like you could contribute to that or derail it in some fashion, we welcome you to join our community. Anything from you?
I don't think I got nothing.
All right, later.